again for joining us on Friday night for the ASEA 5. As you know, we meet here every Friday night where we share stories and talk about these amazing molecules called redox signaling molecules. Now, even though we have a bunch of healthcare professionals on here, this is not a medical company and our product are not meant to treat, diagnose, or cure anything. All they do, which is a lot, is help the cells do their job better. So they enhance healing, they turn on beneficial genes, they help us to look and feel younger, and they just help our bodies do their jobs better. So every week we have the regular four, including me, Dr. Maureen Hayes. I'm a trained anesthesiologist and pain specialist down in Galveston, Texas. But for the last 8 years, I've been full-time teaching redox signaling biochemistry. We also have Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio. Jim is our money man, and beautiful Ann is our nutritionist and physical ed specialist. We also have Dr. Lee Ostler. Dr. Lee is a dentist from Washington State. He's also one of the founding members and past presidents of AOSH, which is the American Academy for Oral System. Do I have that right? American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. And he teaches us about a lot of things, how the health of the gums and the mouth affect our body throughout systemically. And he's an expert pretty much on glutathione and NRF2. And then tonight, back by popular demand, one of our fan favorites is Dr. Ahvie Herskowitz, who's joining us from San Francisco. Now, luckily, Ahvie, because usually it takes me 15 minutes to give his bio and it cuts into the time that we have, has given me an abridged version. Dr. Ahvie is president of one of the oldest integrative medicine societies in the country called ACAM. That's the American College for the Advancement of Medicine. He's also an international leader and educator in the field of personalized precision and integrative medicine. He originally is a Johns Hopkins trained cardiologist and immunospecialist, molecular immunology, and has extensive experience in the science of aging and inflammation. His most recent academic post was as professor of medicine at UC, University of California at San Francisco, but has recently focused on integrative and regenerative medicine in private practice in San Francisco. He also, since I've known Ahvie, has flown all over the world teaching other physicians his techniques and his therapies. So we are so blessed and so excited to have Dr. Ahvie Herskowitz. So Dr. Ahvie, if you wouldn't mind joining us, kind of tell us, give us a little bit more of your background. Tell us how you went from being a traditional Western trained medical doctor practicing cardiology and molecular immunology to going from the East Coast to the West Coast, where you now do integrative and regenerative medicine.
Well, thank you, Maureen, for that introduction, and thank you, everybody and the team. I always enjoy coming every once in a while here and sharing some of my stories, I guess. And I guess when I moved from the East Coast in Baltimore to San Francisco, I just actually had a traditional job of running a cardiovascular research institute, and then was a professor at one of the academic centers. But I always had an open mind, and I come from a European background, and sometimes the Europeans remember things of old and basic concepts more than the academically oriented and modern molecular medicine oriented academics that I trained with and participated with for 25 years. So I just have an open mind, that's all. And I think that things that work have to be studied really hard and understood. So I think one of my revelations was that when I first got out of medical school, I went and did pathology, and before I did medicine and cardiology, and one of the revelations was to study centenarians, people that live a long time and live past 100. And the revelation was pretty simple, but I think pretty profound, and that is 100-plus-year-old people die of the exact same things that the rest of us die from, but they die 25 years later. So it's the same stuff, but just they have more. And I thought my hypothesis was that they had more efficiency. They just were able to repair more efficiently. And then when you study the genetics seem to suggest that they have a lot of pathways that the average person doesn't have that makes things more effective. So it fused ultimately when I met, I think it was about 5 years or so ago, when I met Masami Handloff, who introduced me to ASEA, it made what I envisioned on the wall was the mitochondrial pathways going by from left to right, and just basically saying that if this stuff that happens to work in so many different systems and so many different indications without saying one specifically, because it's not a medicine, as you said, then it has to make things more efficient. But this is redox molecules, and redox is sort of a system that would handle, I guess the way you'd say it in lay terms, would handle the exhaust. So when you generate energy, you have to deal with the exhaust. So you have to have sponges and buffers. So the main buffer of the body is glutathione, and this interacts with it, makes it more, makes more glutathione molecules. And so you're just producing high levels of energy, but not suffering any of the problems. And this, I think, is absolutely fundamental to aging. So that's why I was intrigued that you used the term. It said it makes you feel younger, because I think that that's exactly what you have to expect from something like this, because that's what it would do. It would make you more efficient, which means that you're basically younger, and things will heal faster, and you'll have less. We all eventually die from degeneration, right? What does that mean? That means that the walls of your arteries start to thicken, and what does that mean? Well, you can't clear it at night, or your brain doesn't think. You get a little bit of brain fog, and then ultimately that goes. But it's because you can't repair. You just simply can't repair at the same rate that we need. And this is accelerated today. So it happens to be, I tell all my patients and other people that I talk to, in our universe where the sun is yellow, this stuff works. I mean, that's it. It just is what it is. How someone found it and how someone managed to market it and commercialize it is just simply, I think, a miracle. So, there are more miracles that need to be had. And this is one of the fundamentals in my personal life and in my kids' lives too. And in those patients that want to go this route. They don't like it when I talk about it sometimes, because I'm supposed to be fancy pants and I'm supposed to talk about clinical trials. But in essence, if you're open enough to use what works, then this is it. Now, how about, the economics of it? Well, it's in high doses, it can be expensive, but, I don't know a single other alternative. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, there aren't very many alternatives. I mean, this is not like anything else. So what is that worth? I mean, what is it worth for you to prevent something that will happen to you 2, 3, 4, 5 years later? I don't know the value of that. Everyone has to value it on their own and come up with their own equation. But I think it's unique. The science is fascinating and interesting and opens up a lot of different ideas, but it helps us live in an anti-inflammatory way, and it helps us repair way, and it helps us deal with the exhaust system, which right now we need extra special large mufflers to deal with everything that we're dealing with. And this is one thing that can do it. And it just, so it's about 5 years now or so. And I have several cases of it here, and I like to occasionally sell it to somebody, because this way it supports my own habit.
I love that.
Yeah.
Since you are an expert on aging and anti-aging, can you talk a little bit about the mitochondria? Because most people maybe aren't aware of why they're so important and what their function is,
Right.
and how it is that we're kind of bypassing them or boosting up the power of the mitochondria by supplementing these molecules.
Well, it's the power source of every cell. So this is fundamental. It precedes humans. It's billions. It's probably originally came from bacteria. It's a fundamental piece of nature in almost every organism on the planet. But it's the main source of energy production. So it's a complex system. It's evolved over billions of years. So it has to generate energy for every cell of the body to work every instant of the day. So ultimately, the goal of the mitochondria is to produce something called ATP, and we make about 7 kilograms of this every day. So this is a lot of stuff that's produced, and it has to be continuous. So it's a constant nanomotor, as I call it. It's a nanomotor, and every cell has hundreds or thousands of them. And when we're young, they're there, and they're functioning as well as they will compared to later in life. So as you go down to 20, 30, 40, by the time you're 50, you have, a fraction of what you started with. So that has to be done. Then you have to live more efficiently, because otherwise you'll feel it. You'll get tired in the middle of the day. You'll stop sleeping well, and so on. So all these subtleties, I have aches and pains, and all these subtleties will happen. So one of the things that when you generate ATP, you need oxygen, you need amino acids to function. It's better to have fatty acids than glucose, which is the main source. But it's good to have certain things like magnesium, B vitamins, and so on. And that, I think, those things are generally covered by the other ASEA products, the oral products, right? Because we're dealing with the same machinery. So ASEA handles the byproducts of all this stuff. And as Dr. Ostler would say, it covers the reactive oxygen species, or it produces the abnormal sets of oxygen that the body doesn't use well and is inflamed by. So the net thing is just positive, because it carries the garbage away, and then allows you to ultimately become more efficient in generating what every cell needs to do. And that's really the same thing as saying, I'm going to age more gracefully, because the mitochondria are linearly related, are absolutely related with high correlations to the number of mitochondria that you have and how well they're functioning.
That's fascinating. And I think the biggest thing that affects our mitochondria is aging. We have about 10% less per decade after puberty, is what I've always been taught. And they're affected not only by age, but by toxins. And you talked about having to have that massive exhaust system.
So you were commenting about, glutathione and centenarians, which there are not that many of those around that, make it to 100 disease free. And so, here we're talking more than just age, anti-age, which is a big industry, but we're talking age reversal. My eyes are about an age 38-year-old, and I'm 55. So when our body can start healing and the cells can regenerate, it's quite amazing. And so since you specialized, right? Didn't you specialize in cardiology? So maybe you can share about how the redox signaling makes everything else that we take that's healthy work better. So like our omegas, our omega line is top notch, and it's giving us the 357 that we need, but we know that the omega helps the heart. So maybe you could share a little bit about how the redox signaling makes omega or anything else you take work better. Do you find that by taking the redox and doing the supplement, they work in tandem to where they can work better because of the molecules?
Because everything, thank you. First of all, you didn't have to give away that you were 55, because we wouldn't know. So that's number one. Everything that we do that's so-called healthy, you could argue makes mitochondria more efficient. It's the same language. It's just talking lay language versus what's really going on inside the cell health. And that's, I think, why the C was called cellular health, I think. So what goes into this cycle? This cycle is made more effective by having fatty acids involved in energy production, because as you know, as a nutritionist, glucose is the main source, but that most of us use in the United States, and that's why we're not doing that well. So that's an inflammatory source, and ultimately it's a source that produces more weight and more fat. But the more efficient way of dealing with energy production is having the healthy fats. And what does that mean? That means that every cell membrane of the body is now going to be fed what's healthier for it to produce more energy. Now, if you do that and you have amino acids that produce proteins that are effective, and then you have the other things which are important, which are the B complex vitamins, which are in the, I think, in the ASEA things, then you're going to produce more ATP, okay, and more efficiently. So that's when you need something around to buffer all the side effects and all the I guess the exhaust of that generation of more energy. So we normally have that when we're young, because we have a tremendous set of pathways that produce glutathione and all the other antioxidants of the body. But as we get older and get exposed to the food supply, which is basically poisoned in the United States, and the stress levels, which we all have to deal with every single day to make it through a very, very interesting time, but for decades now, then you need to have these types of things that support that system and get the antioxidant system up to speed. Now, you can do that vis-a-vis vitamin C. You could do that with resveratrol. You could do that with other things, but this by far is the most efficient one. It pales in comparison to the others. So this is a whole molecular system that's evolved over 1 billion years, these redox molecules, and they signal everything. So they allow so many different pathways to take forward. And then Dr. Ostler will teach us at any time that he gets a chance, that it pushes everyone into this reparative mode, into the mode of what we call in immunology, the anti-inflammatory mode, because those things just don't allow the production of the signaling that sets us backwards. So it just is what it is. I mean, this is just the reality of this thing that we call ASEA. And we could have called it something else in another world, but this is what it's called. And it's a pristine, exceptionally safe set of molecules that we all naturally have, but we're running deficient in. So we're basically replenishing our deficient supply. Just like if you have low thyroid, you have to get thyroid. You're not going to be normal unless you have it. If your adrenal is bad, you need some. So we're just giving ourselves what we naturally, and as a society, the average person, more than the average person, the overwhelming majority of people are deficient in it.
Exactly.
You hate to see, and I'm sure you are seeing younger and younger patients, because people tend to think that a lot of the people that need redox supplementation are older people like Lee. Sorry, Lee. But when you made this statement a little while ago, you talked to some of your patients, and why won't they look at this? Is it just the snob appeal? Is it just because it's made from salt water? What is it that keeps people that you see? Because, my God, you're one of the most, highest regarded doctors, frankly, around. Why wouldn't they look at you and go, wow, you're doing this, I need to do this?
Well, I think it may be my approach, but you're probably a better salesperson than I am, but I do think that there's this meme that comes across my mind that this gal is looking across the ocean, and very pretty scene, and she's saying, well, there's a whole lot of stupid out there. And so there's people who just don't want to take the necessary steps because they say something like, well, I've heard of vitamin C. I don't even know what glutathione is. I'm going to look it up, and I'm going to look it up, and they never do, of course. And then,
right.
And then at the end of the day, 6 months later, they have no excuse but to say, I'm basically the same, or I'm a little bit worse. When you look at these things that produce telomere lengths that increase, these products don't have the science behind them, and they cost around $5,000, $6,000 a year to take. And my patients that have been on these, the people with unlimited resources who try everything, they've been taking these things for 5 years. And suffice it to say that I've never seen anything change or anything, anything actually improve. But when you take 100 people and you put them on ASEA with sufficient doses, and everyone, may be a little bit different. And that's where I think some of the MDs and some of the practitioners and dentists have some advantages. But you don't need a lot of medical knowledge to know if someone calls you up and says, this is what this stuff has done for me, and I think I'm getting better. And then there's the group that says, I tried it for 1 week and nothing happened. And I warned him right away. I said, listen, if you're not going to take it for 3 months, then just maybe you shouldn't take it, because sometimes, like myself personally, as you all know, I can feel it immediately. And that's the minority of people, but it doesn't mean I'm healthier or not healthier. It just is my system. But suffice it to say that if you think that you can reverse a fast moving train going downhill the wrong direction in 1 week, then you don't understand the complexity of the human body, and you're just naive. So you need, just like you need to, if you're going to change your diet, you can't change your diet for a week and expect remarkable effects. It's just not going to happen. And you're not going to take care of one cavity in your mouth and suddenly everything's going to be better. You have to take care of everything. So it's just logical stuff. So the more open people are, and the more you have stories to tell them, I think that's the key. People don't respond to the science, they respond to the stories.
Exactly.
Well,
I like that.
Could you explain one more time? You talked about taking the garbage out, mopping things up, the exhaust side of this. I know there's a lot of athletes and people who, do a lot of, they tax their bodies sometimes, and they talk about their ability to recover. And that, I believe that has something to do with the mitochondria and that process you were just talking. Could you elaborate on that for just a moment?
Yeah, so it's, you want to call it reserve, recovery, resilience. These are all different terms for different features of how you can recover. Your recovery is largely a function of mitochondrial function, but it's also a function of pH. The more after you work out, if you just sit on the couch all day for the rest of the day and you don't move, you're going to be acidotic and you're not going to heal as much. But most of us don't want to sit in an ice bath after we work out. Most of us don't do that, but they'll do extraordinary things and get body massages and go to they'll go into the jumpers and so on. They'll get their lymphatics, optimized and so on, because that's their full-time job. But to the point that was made earlier, before I get to your point, Lee, youngsters, relatively younger folks, I started my kids, one when he was about 20, and the other one when he was 17. He was captain of the football team. And I try to get the coach to get all the football players on, but he was one of these guys who didn't believe in it. So yeah, absolutely. When you take this at any age, you'll be more likely than not, you'll get more efficient. And so when you look at my story about my story about the exhaust, you know better than I do the multiple pathways that are necessary to function all in the right direction without antagonizing each other. So you're looking for a net effect, and that's what I love about this stuff. The net effect is overwhelmingly positive. So how do you find that? You can find that I can give you probably 6 to 10 different supplements to take to offset the effect of ASEA, to mimic it. But I have to do it sequentially. I have to do it one thing after another. I have to go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on. And then I'll produce more ATP. But if I use this, it's a summation of a net effect that's positive that supplants that type of strategy, because ASEA is smarter than we are. And it happens to be that it's in this type of product. I mean, I can't explain it because no one, I don't know every single signaling molecule that exists. No one does. So the net effect is overwhelmingly positive. So, and that's why it's worth the attention, and that's why it's worth the time and also the money for the person to use it. Now, the interesting thing for me that I've never taken advantage of, much to Maureen's consternation, is that if you build a business around it, then all the better. I mean, that's awesome. a great idea, frankly, but it's something that you guys do
You'll get
better
there,
than I do.
Bobby.
Yeah. What?
I said, you'll get there.
But
I love,
the science
yeah.
is so overwhelming. I have to say, I mean, I have created a website for stem cells. It's called understandingstemcells.com, whatever. I'm not trying to push it, but this is not trying to sell anything. It takes about 1,000 hours to put together a site that is informative, that really talks about the data. So it would take me 2,000 hours to do the ASEA thing. And I just don't have 2,000 hours, to do it. But the science has already been done. The science doesn't sell the product, but it's there. It's ultimately the effect that you get when people take it.
You just brought up stem cells, and I'd like to ask you about that. But first, I want to tell you, I like to refer to ASEA as a biohack. It's kind of like a shortcut. Now,
Yeah.
we know what it does, and you've been wonderful about explaining that all. But for people, the more good you can do, as you're saying, the more good you can do, the better your ATP, the less stress you're going to be putting on the body, the better the redox molecules are going to work. But since you brought up stem cells, and we were talking about a little bit earlier today about stem cells, we all know that stem cells, or those of us who are familiar with stem cells, maybe not everybody is, they're pluripotential cells, and they have to be instructed. Do you think,
Right.
and this is theoretical, but would you speak to that about, what might
Yeah.
be helping?
Yeah. So I remember putting a slide together in one of my courses on stem cell therapies for doctors, like you got to study what's going on and so on. So, and I put ASEA there as one of these. So I said, what is known to affect our own inherent stem cells? So just for the audience to understand, our stem cells are not different. They're not yet instructed what to do. They have to they have to help us when we need them. Okay. So they're present in every blood vessel of the body, surrounding every blood vessel of the body. And then, not that you want to do this, but if you got hit by a bus, this will ultimately all get activated at one time and get you over the injury. But when you have an injury, whether it's a small cut in your finger or a larger set of injuries, this is what ultimately goes and gets recruited, that instructs the immune system in a top level way on healing properly. So then you say, well, what does this? We know certain things do this already. So we know, based on literature, that more likely than not, intermittent fasting talks to our own stem cells. So that's a productive stress. Okay, it's a productive stress that the body likes. When we go up to high altitude, which is not very comfortable and not very common, when we get hypoxic, that's a productive stress and stem cells activate. It's not something I recommend, but it's something that we know in science does. So, and then if you have a real injury, like you're having a heart attack, that will excite it, but it's not a great stress. That's not productive. So here you have these molecules that are signaling us to be more efficient and more youthful, quote unquote. So it's certainly extremely likely that they do communicate with our stem cell population. And if someone wants to do the study, I'd be happy to instruct them how to do it. But it's not an easy study to organize, because stem cells in the circulation are not easy to measure. But yes, I think that I put it on the list right away, that this was and all my colleagues said, well, what is that? So it took a half an hour. It would take a half hour to explain, but I think that that's true. I think that they do communicate. And I think that is one of the most important things that puts it on the level of truly, let's say, healing types of regimens, in addition to the things I mentioned before. You can override ASEA's effect by going to McDonald's 5 times a week. Yeah, you can do it. I mean, it's not going to help you but at the same time, when you get yourself into that positive mode of life, this will get you there much faster, in my opinion.
Hey, Ahvie, when was this going to catch on in medicine? You talked about you teach it a little bit. There's a lot of people who say, why don't we know more about this, and why isn't our physician telling us?
That's a really good point. Well, I mean, two stories about that. First of all, hand washing took 40 years in the 1800s, and that's probably around the right amount of time. So ASEA is what, 15 years, 20 years old? Is that so? You have to count to 40 years before anyone would actually do it. And then I'll tell you the story about all my colleagues. UCSF, Hopkins was at that time the #1 cardiology center in the country. And then I moved over to UCSF, which is #6. And my colleagues there just look terrible. I mean, they don't look good. And I'm saying, well, how come you guys don't take care of yourselves? I mean, you're teaching the society how to have heart health, but we're eating potato chips and bagels from the pharmaceutical industry. And there are a lot of paradoxes, is the point, Lee. The paradoxes in medicine are real, that people don't tend to want to learn new things. And that's just human nature, but there seems to be a bit less openness in the medical field than in other fields. That's just the way it is. And I'm not going to yell and scream anymore. I just stopped. I just left the university about 5 years ago and just stopped teaching integrative medicine. Because as any nutritionist will tell you, that vitamin D is important, D3K2 and CoQ10 is important for heart health. And how many times I ever taught it to the cardiology fellows, not a single one ever ordered it for a patient. So you just have this type of things that this stuff is magic, it's salt water. Well, it's wrapping your mind around mitochondria. If you're a neurologist or you're an endocrinologist or a rheumatologist, where something affects every part of your body and everything is linked together, is something that the medical field is not yet ready, still not ready to think about and wrap their brains around. It's just not the way we're taught. We're taught to think in silos, and this is more of this transcends the silos.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow. You know, we bring it up, and I love having Ann on here because, you know, Ahvie, I'm sure it was the same when you went to medical school as when I did. We took a year of pharmacology, same as all the pharmacy students. But I had 1 day of nutritional training, and it had to do with a scope book that had pictures in it that showed vitamin deficiencies like scurvy and
the
rickets.
pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah, the food pyramid, which put potato chips as the #1 food that we should be eating.
Bread. Actually, you say bread.
It's so ludicrous. I mean, it's so ludicrous where you say, well, the doctor says, well, I don't, I have doctors telling my patients all the time, listen, nutrition is just not that important. It's just not the big deal. That's why I'm not talking to you about it. That's why I don't want you to have a consult, even with the clinical nutritionist in the hospital. Because it's not that important. Well, if that's how you feel, then I'm not going to talk to you about, redox molecules, because you're just not going to be open to it. So you don't just stop wasting your time. When you talk to an average person and you can get through with your own personal story, because most of us here have them, then that's the way to get the door open, and that's the way to talk, because the science is there. You can always refer to the links. There's hundreds of links and hundreds of scientific articles. So that's fine. But what is the net effect,
The proof is in the pudding. I'm sorry, Jim.
No,
I'm getting texts, Ahvie, on how young you look.
It looks awesome.
It's been a while since you've been on. So, I think we all look.
Yeah, I keep a perpetual tan.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I tried. I think that, listen, my personal goal, listen, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, okay, and that's New York, Maureen. It's not
My husband's from Brooklyn.
Yes, East Coast, I know, and now I'm almost one step in front of the ocean on the West Coast. But I'm a practical type of a person, and I don't believe in paradigms. And I learned that early on, that what you think is what people are telling you may or may not be true. So I think that if you're truly serious about health span, or that's the healthy lifespan, not just doing the American dream, which I think right now is the American dream is when you hit 80, you should go to a comfortable nursing home. Well, that's not my goal. Okay, that's not. And so I work hard at it. I cheat. I live. but at the same time, I understand when my body's talking to me, and I understand when I need to take an entire bottle of that stuff. And I do that more frequently than not. And that's one of the, now I happen to think that the ounce for ounce power of Renew 28 happens to be, extraordinary. I mean, I think that stuff is so potent. And I also use it on my face. I use it on my skin. So I use it every day. So I think that also plays a role.
Oh,
But
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
If food were enough, wouldn't there be a lot of healthier people?
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you consider that when you add in the good water, good exercise, good nutrition, but do you consider Redox to be the missing link that makes all of that work a lot better?
Yeah, you'd say that. Yeah, well, that's one way to look at it. I just say that right now, if you don't understand the level of stressors that we're under, I don't mean emotional, I mean physiological stress that we're under right now, then you don't understand the concept of how you must absolutely 100% must layer different technologies. You have to. So yeah, one night you sleep better than others. Okay, ultimately you try to figure that out. You have to eat much more pristinely than you have in the past, and make sure that. So you have to get a consult from somebody if you don't know enough, and you don't have the patience to look all this stuff up. But this happens to be one of the layers, and that's a blessing, because without it, you'd have to figure something else out. You'd have to do other things that take more time. This doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, for heaven's sakes, it takes 30 seconds to drink it. I mean, this is not a lot of effort. This is, if this supplants an hour worth of exercise extra that you would have to have, and then you'd have to have extra glutathione afterwards in order to recover properly, then that's not very time efficient. And this is so it's a beautiful solution. That's all I could say. And I think that everyone on the phone who has used it and has an effect or has a story understands how difficult it is to find anything like this. It's just difficult.
Hey, Dr. Ahvie, we're actually having a number of people ask in the chat section if you will share your ASEA story with us. You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but if you could go into a little bit more.
Well, again, I've been following, to me, conceptually, because I was trained in biblical language. So I believe that there was a time when people lived a long time. So I think one of the fascinating things about it is that I know the water supply now is nothing like it used to be. So I've been studying waters and structured waters for some time, and I had tried a half a dozen different products out there and so on. So ultimately, we had about 100 or so patients on a certain product that ultimately became a pharmaceutical product that is not yet available, but is being used only in quite very severe illness. So I was looking for an alternative, and then poof, I show up to a meeting, and then I meet Miss Handloff, okay, Masami. So she is a fire, ball, and has a great story of her own that's perhaps more intense than mine. But I then put the same 100 people on the same stuff, and they basically had a better effect. So if that's the case, then I say, well, now it's time for me to study the science, because the science is always a little bit unique. It's different. And then what does it teach us? And so we got to go in that direction. So the science was already largely done. So it was easy. And then I just tried it myself. And then I could feel it immediately. So I can feel an effect immediately. So, and then I try, and both of my sons can feel it immediately. So I don't know whether that's genetic or not. It doesn't mean very much, but I could feel it. So I just had the original group all on it. And that's the most important thing, that you can have stories that can be told. Now, my patients are not coming to me to create a business. So that's one of the issues for me. I don't spend time sort of allowing that part of the ASEA thing to grow in them, because I'm not doing it for that reason.
Ahvie, can you speak to the people that say they're taking it and they're taking it correctly, but yet they don't feel anything. Could you speak to the fact that it is working, whether or not they feel it or not?
Yeah, so actually, there's two things. If you're super healthy and you take something that makes you more efficient, you won't feel anything unless you put yourself under conditions where you're quantitatively measuring stuff. So, you know, if you have certain amount of grip strength and you take something like this and your grip strength increases, then you'll know. But how many of us walk around with a grip strength machine? So if you're super healthy, that's the reality. If you're iller, you have to give it time. And then ultimately, whatever the measure that you're looking for. But the measures that I would look for is recovery time, strength. I always used to get a cold twice, 3 times a year, and now I don't get them anymore. I used to get sore when I tried to do 10 push-ups, and now I could do 15 or 20 and not get sore. These types of quantitative measures are important. And sleep patterns improve. And so it's not something that you say, oh, my serum sodium is suddenly going to get better, or my hemoglobin A1C, my blood sugar is going to improve, but slowly over time it may very well improve. But so it's something when you're doing something fundamental and you're trying to reverse absolute thing that happens with everyone who ages, period. You have to give it time. It's just not possible to take a train that's running 100 miles an hour and stop it on a dime. It just doesn't work that way. There's a tremendous amount of energy and systems that have adapted to your current state of health. And that's not, guess what? When you're not efficient, everything becomes inefficient. So things have to settle back down and slowly move the train in the right direction. And then the brakes will work. And then you can power up and do your thing, and you will feel better. Now, the other things that are out there that are anti-aging per se, and they're very expensive, they tell them that you may have to use it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years before you'll feel something. This is a lot less. We're just saying. I think you should say you got to use it for 3 months. That's my opinion. That's the summation.
And you know what? You may not. Absolutely. Avi, people keep asking what it was that you originally felt. I know for me, I felt nothing for about 6 weeks. I thought I was just drinking salt water, but I had labs, very important labs, that did change with no explanation. It wasn't when it first happened, I didn't know to credit ASEA with that. But if you wouldn't mind, it runs the gamut. I think it's important for people to know that. But what did you experience? I think you felt that energy right away, didn't you?
It's an energy. So I would feel, for my own personally, and for a lot of people who do feel it, quote unquote, they'll feel mental clarity. They'll feel that their focus is just naturally there, more present, mentally clear. And then even if you study this quantitatively, if you use it right before exercise, you will note, for those of us that do feel it, quote unquote, you'll get a quantitative boost. You'll be able to do more of whatever you were doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd like to point people to the amazingmolecules.com site, because there's some articles in there that talk about what you're referring to right now with the shift in metabolomics. There's a study. If you go to amazingmolecules.com and go to the bottom, click more videos, go to the second page and scroll down, you'll see some really interesting information there from Dr. David Neiman at the Appalachian State University, talking about the mitochondrial shift in metabolomics. You made reference earlier to the shift from glucose to fatty acids. Yes. And they made the comment in that study that these athletes that they were studying had this shift occur before they exercised. They didn't have to go exercise to see the shift occur. You could almost be a couch potato and do this and see the same benefits of this metabolomic shift occurring.
You know what else does that? Is one other thing I can tell you does that, and that's stem cells.
Stem cells.
That they do the same type of thing.
Well, this whole idea, and Anne made a mention of it earlier, you know, and you've talked about the layering. I think it's important to point out that this healthy living concept, you know, we're not just doing one thing. You can't eat, you know, drink ASEA and eat Cheetos and watch football and expect to be healthy. We have to do more, and but all of those healthy things that we do, the eating, the fasting, the exercise, you know, reducing your stress, getting good sleep, all of those things work together because they have a direct effect on the mitochondria. And I think it's important just to point out that what we're doing with this replenishment supplement, restoring native molecules that we already make, we're filling the gas tank so that we can simply accomplish the work of the cell at a higher level more quickly. And I think that echoes in all the things you've been saying.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that you remember you're drinking it, right? And then it's going to get absorbed in your stomach and get systemic, okay? So when's the peak concentration going to happen? It's going to happen fairly rapidly. So what happens for the other 23.5 hours? Well, it's not in peak concentration. So this is not an intravenous therapy, okay? It's an oral therapy. So you can either take a big bolus once a day or take 2 small boluses throughout, you know, but it's not a continuous thing. So you have to do other things. As it pushes you in a better direction, then you have to support it. You got to do other things. And if you don't, then Maureen will punish you.
Well, I think it's funny that people, you know, they try it during the week and they say, oh, it's not working. And, you know, maybe they're just doing the very minimum, but only 15% see any kind of anything in the first week. That's why we say do it 90 days. And it's not like a magic potion where poof, everything's gone that you've been doing since puberty. You know, your redox drops every year. So, you know, they have to give it time, because you didn't get it overnight the way you are, and you won't see it go away overnight. You have 75 trillion cells to regenerate. And that's why you have to be willing to take enough, you know, for long enough. But we know it's going to work. It's part of the human body. You've got redox in you from birth. It's depleting. So give it time, take enough. And then when you add Renew 28, which is twice the concentration of the oral, I mean, you're going to see, you know, much faster results. I tell people, you know, put it on your lymph nodes, put the Renew on your lymph nodes. You're going to improve your immune system. I mean, this just is so much more simple than trying to teach, you know, rack your brain with nutrition. It really is more simple. Drink it, rub it. You know.
How much do you tell people to drink, Ahvie?
Oh yeah, well I don't go with the 2 ounce thing, 2 ounce twice a day. So for me the minimum is 4 ounces at a time, and I think better to do it twice a day, or sometimes I just have an 8 ounce bottle in my bathroom right next door to me here. So I just take 8 ounces, boom, take it. I take my my other things from the refrigerator, and that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah.
And then I love on the back of the bottle, the new studies added, giving the body the ability to handle stress. I mean, how many people out there need to handle stress? I mean, everyone has had stress last year. So why not supplement your body to support that? Fight it.
Yeah, again, for the audience, it's, you know, we say the word stress and we always go to emotional and mental. We're talking about cellular stress. That ultimately all that ends up to stress your system a little bit further. So what that means is you'll age more acceleratedly during that period of time. So yeah, if you go to your practitioner out there and say, listen, I want to know how to optimize my ability to handle stress, they should look at thyroid function and adrenal function, because those things are important. And, you know, hormone function, so to speak, right? But then if everything is working well, this makes everything work better. So
exactly.
So, and if not working well, then it makes it better. So it depends on if your perspective is preventative and to be precise in your targeting of a system that will benefit you more likely no matter what, then this is something that you should consider.
Ahvie, how big was the genetic study that came out 3 years ago, that average age of 35-year-old doing 8 ounces a day? How big was that to you when you saw that?
Well, I think Maureen Dr. Hayes could speak to that a little bit further, because it's not surprising that genetics that would lean one against inflammation and towards reparative things, all those genetics would be expected to be activated. Those ultimately leading to proteins that could help you do everything that we do a little bit better. So I'm not surprised. I wasn't involved in the design of the study, which I had hoped to be involved in. So I don't remember the exact details, but I remember that it was all consistent with what you would normally expect. And you know what? Those things that are activated with ASEA are similar in trends to things that you see activated, or more. There are more pathways involved that are activated in people who are centenarians. It's the same stuff. If you can't handle your sugar properly, you can't handle your energy properly, you can't be you're having inflammatory reactions to stuff, and you don't have enough compensatory systems, which include, of course, as Lee knows, glutathione as the master antioxidant and detoxifiant. If you don't have good detox pathways, well, then you need to figure out a different approach. If you weren't born with this stuff, then you have to figure out another way. So you can either spend $3,000 and get your genome sequenced and have no actionable information from it, or you could just say, listen, I understand. I'm probably not one of those 1 in 5,000 people that are going to naturally, the grandma that's smoking 3 cigars a day and still lives to 110. Well, I'm probably not like that. So let me do some risk management here, and I'll worry about it with this particular sort of signature type of approach, which to me is beautiful because it takes 60 seconds a day. And I'm going to put it on my lymph nodes also. I didn't realize it was a good thing. So good.
Hey Jim, with everything that Ahvie said, where's this going? Where do you think this is headed?
I was going to ask Ahvie that exact same question, because there's no cap to this. The thing that still surprises me as an ex-stockbroker, I'm not sure. Do you hear a hiss on the line?
No.
You don't hear? Okay. But no one's mimicked this. No one has replicated this. It's been on the open market for 10 years. If people really knew what we had, there's no cap to this. But is that a little surprising, Ahvie, that nobody's copied this?
Yeah. So my name is Ahvie, not Ahvie.
Sorry.
So
Sorry.
yeah. So I'm not surprised by anything anymore. But I'm not surprised why the market would go up 20% and in the worst time in history. So I'm not shocked and surprised by paradoxical things, because I think systems are very difficult to change. And it's sort of, if you took this to FDA, they would sort of say, well, what division should I send it to?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to send it to? Cardiology? No. Where pain? Maybe. Okay. I mean, Renew can go to pain and Renew can go to burns, but where am I going to do it? I have no idea what to do with a mitochondrial formula. What am I supposed to do with that? So please go away. But at the same time, you have to, the audience has to remember that if we try to get aspirin approved now, we wouldn't be able to, because it's a complicated plant. It's not easy when something has multiple pathways for us to get our minds around it. And I think that's the fundamental thing. So if you understand that, you'll beat the trend in by 10, 20 years, and you'll get in on the ground floor, and you do what and you make it as valuable as you want to make it in your life. But that's a personal choice. But right now it's pretty mature company, but it's certainly it can grow 10 or 100x, just like anything that can do the things that this particular thing does. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And you get more people on it as you're sharing it more. You're going to get more people on it. That's why that's our mission, is to share with as many people that are within 6 feet of us, we're going to share it because we want more people to share it around the world.
Right, and I want to thank Masami for doing that for me. So I would normally, I don't think I have met it after Masami. Obviously, I've met a lot of my colleagues at ASEA, but without her, I wouldn't have been introduced. So, to my credit, she was great.
Awesome, that's awesome.
And Maureen and I have also shared the booths for the doctors with the integrative doctors and integrative dentists. And we have a certain trick that we use at the booth to show how I think a drop of Renew can make you stronger. I think Maureen is really good at it. And it blows people away. It just does. I mean, Lee's seen it too. And Lee does it also. It's just hard to say, what kind of, is that a magic trick or what did you just do? To me, no, all I did is put the stuff on you and that's it. It's not magic. It is the effect that it has. And it just, you have to understand a little bit of physics too, to believe how that's possible. But this stuff works and that's it. You have to make it what you can, you know?
Yeah. 3 times 5 minutes, you can see somebody's strength, their range of motion, their balance, obviously discomfort. You just have to be willing to, try it, sample it so you can see it work.
Well, you know what, I'm laughing because people are asking, who is this mystical Masami? So I just want you to know she's a fierce ASEA associate who shares it with everybody who will listen. And she's a diamond in ASEA. So,
Yeah.
and
great.
when she got started, we barely understand what she was saying to us. So we should have Masami on. So you guys, next week, we are going to be sharing our stories, right, Jim? It's going to be the ASEA 4. So it'll be the Fab 4. So maybe we'll have Masami on too, so you can see who this whirlwind is, this
great.
Tasmanian devil. But Dr. Ahvie, thank you so much. You have done just a wonderful job of explaining this and giving it so much credibility. And you guys, let me just say, don't make it too complicated. Like Ann said, drink it. Rub it. That's all you have to do. It doesn't matter if you take, my husband drinks all 8 ounces at once in the morning. You probably works better if you can spread it out. But the most important thing is to get it into your body and let it start to work. And it doesn't matter what your challenge is. If it entails a cell, then give it the ASEA. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to make anything worse. It might be the answer to prayer. So by all means, give it a shot. So
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.